2021 has been an amazing year in the real estate business and in this area, really in Northwest Florida. What we're going to do today, I got Price Rayner with me. We're going to go through and talk about what the numbers were last year, what we've seen the last few years, some things that are shaping up pretty interesting. So whether you're a buyer or a seller, we're going to share with you exactly what's going on in the real estate market right now. All right, Price, so we really have had an incredible couple of years here, and what I'd love to do is let's start with what we've seen literally in the last few years, some of the changes, the numbers, the statistics, those types of things, if you don't mind.
Sure. And we have had a tremendous few years, and the numbers we're going to talk about are specific to the 30A market, but it's similar all along the coast. I mean, everything has just been really strong in terms of number of sales and pricing and all that's, been really strong the last 2 years. But in our markets, specifically 30A, we saw in 2019, we sold about 1,074 homes. And then in 2020, that bumped up to 1,714 homes. And last year, we sold 1,844 homes. So it is an incredible amount of homes, and to think we're 1,074 2 years ago and up to almost 1,850 homes sold, really seeing some very strong demand.
Yeah, and it really speaks to kind of almost a fundamental change in what was valuable to people. If the pandemic did anything, it put a value on having some room around you, which with us having 25,000 acres and the amount of land we have that's state owned. Also just giving the ability to have a small town community feel and having the ability to have something really that had that coastal environment, had some little bit of advantage there. Obviously that has played to this. To think that we've moved that many transactions up is just incredible. It's a fundamental shift on some of the desires.
No doubt about it. Yeah, those things that people find desirable, I mean, they're coming from all across the country. It's remarkable, the amount of people and the locations in which they're coming from to our little neck of the woods here, It's been amazing. But and to speak to that, I mean, we've seen pricing move up tremendously over the last few years in lockstep with the acceleration in the number of transactions, where in 2019, the average price of a home along 30A was $1,165,000. Back when we got in business, it had doubled since then to get there, and then gosh, in 2020, the average price moved up to $1,482,000. Thereafter, last year's up to $1,820,000. So I mean, that's like 60-70% increase in 2 years, and we're just seeing such an amount of short supply and such demand. It's really just moved pricing up so dramatically. It's amazing.
It is, and there's a couple of the numbers besides just price and the number of transactions we look at to get a feel for what's going on in the market. What would you speak to on some of those
Well, another good price to look at or another area to look at, I think, is price per square foot. And when we begin to look at that and look at 2019, where the average square foot price was $432 per square foot, and then in 2020 moved up to a little bit over 500, and then now it's up to 633 was the average last year. But interestingly, when I went back and I just looked at just December, to look at December 2021, the average price there is $702 a square foot. So we're seeing, just ramping up there as well. And then, and those are all good signs, kind of talking about really supply and demand imbalance. But the statistic that I think speaks most specifically to demand is days on market. And when we see that and we look at 2019, the average days on market for a home along 38 took 150 days for the home to sell. And then it went down a little bit in 2020 to 141 days on market, so we still had a pretty fair amount of inventory. And now the average last year is down to 54 days on market. So you've seen that, by 2/3 decrease over 2 years. And again, when I went and just looked at December, the last month of the year, it's like 34 days on market. So you're talking just a tick over a month. So just all signs point to demand being strong and really strengthening towards the end of the year.
Yeah, amazing. And so that's kind of a little bit of where we've been. Now let's talk about where we are heading into the season and the first of the year now. What are you looking at and watching, and what do you anticipate coming forward?
Well, what we're looking at right now is the number of active homes, and then sold homes per month. It's kind of the first thing I look at, where we have about 159 homes that are currently on the market. And in December we sold 179. So I mean that takes us lower than really 34 days on market. You're more like in the middle 20s is what that's going to work out to. So we're just seeing demand continue to strengthen in our market, and that's one of the things that we're looking at. And then another thing is just kind of listening to our agents. I know that you guys on Wednesday are having some, we have every Wednesday have our agents in for a roundtable to talk about off-market deals, and hearing them talk about the amount of buyers they have, and then also hearing more and more talk about listings. So that encourages me that we may, and we need it, and we historically do, see more inventory come into the market in January, February, March to meet where we see our largest influx of demand is really the day after the Super Bowl. It really ramps up and starts our spring selling season. So I'm encouraged to think we may have some really quality supply to meet that the demand that's here, and should increase over the next 4 to 8 weeks.
Yeah, and I think that's encouraging. One thing that we can typically say, simple economics can tell us, when we've got this much demand, this low supply, what do you anticipate as far as pricing?
Oh, I mean, it's Econ 101, price is going to go up. I mean, it's there. I don't see any way that it can't. Some geopolitical situation, which heck, it may just make it stronger here.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit then what the typical cycle would be. Then obviously, this thing is pretty much lining up with a lot of a typical cycle. It doesn't seem that way, but the numbers do. So when you have this, where you've had 60-something% in the last couple 3 years, basically in the price increases. You've got low demand and high. You're probably going to see increases again. What is that? What is the tipping point where you begin to see some resistance? Where are those things?
Well, if we talk about a cycle, and if we look at an 18 or 18 and a half year cycle, and we try to look at that, and we say, okay, maybe if we say the bottom was 2009 or 10, and you say 14 and a half years. From that point, so it's somewhere, the top of a cycle could be 2024, 2025, somewhere in there, maybe, somewhere give or take a year. So with that, we should still be in a part of the cycle where we should see the number of sales probably increase again, along with the pricing increase again for 2022, and then maybe 23 and 24 are a period where possibly sales start to slow a little bit, but pricing continues to increase for another couple years, notwithstanding something goofy happen.
Yeah, we always watch for when does that hesitation come from buyers, or when is that price resistance? We just haven't seen it yet.
We haven't seen it, and usually the telltale sign is days on market. We'll see that start to creep up as an indication that there's resistance to price, because they would tell you, the cure for high prices is high prices. So at some point, as you say, there will be resistance, and that's our leading indicator. Will be pendings, watching the amount of pendings move down, and usually along with that, we'll see days on market start to creep up, but we're continuing to see days on market go down at this point.
Absolutely. Well, let's speak specifically to buyers and sellers. I want to start with buyers because we have some people that are like, well, I'm going to wait till this thing pulls back. That's a losing game right now.
Yeah, it is.
So from that standpoint, let's speak specifically to the person that's considering buying and is trying to time the market, so to speak. What would you say? I know.
Well, timing the market. I haven't seen anyone that made that work yet. But you're in an environment right now where prices are still increasing, and we have interest rates that are at historic lows still, and looking at out the next 12 months, there's a distinct possibility that rates will be on the increase. They're already increasing now. So there's probably no better time if you're going to use leverage, or if you're in this market for the long term, to go ahead and pull the trigger. If we like we've talked about, we've got some really quality inventory that's coming on board here right now over the next few months. There's no better time than to be mining through that inventory to see if you find something that works for you.
Yeah, and obviously, a lot of people are looking at this from an investment standpoint where they may rent some of these properties. We're seeing rental rates go up faster than property value rates. So from an investment standpoint, if you're looking at it that way, there's those things. From the ROI we always talk about that you can't put a number on, which is those family memories, that legacy type memories, time continues to tick, and it is going to continue to move forward. And so in reality, the sooner you get those memories started, the better. So from that standpoint, a buyer, obviously, there's opportunity. It needs to be vetted out, needs to be a long-term view.
Yes.
And it needs to be with the right focus. That's where a quality agent comes in right now.
Definitely.
And so from that standpoint, buyers, there's opportunities. Let's speak specifically to sellers. Again, we're hearing some of these folks that, hey, I'm going to time this market. Not necessarily that, but they're thinking, should I hold it because prices are going up, or should I go ahead and sell? What would you speak to that?
Well, let's sell into strength. That's what we always say, and I think there's no better time right now where we have this demand that is still increasing.
Right.
We're seeing multiple offer situations. There's just such low demand that I think there's not a better time to sell. And what we have out here there are not many people that are leaving our market.
Right.
So for this for the very same reason we're talking about, it may make sense to be a buyer right now. If you can sell and reposition, there's no better time to do that than now.
Right. And I would say this from a seller's perspective. In reality, where we are in the cycle right now, we never know exactly where we are in this thing. Nobody's going to time that exactly. But there is a point in time where we come to a place where the upside potential begins to be outweighed with the downside risk. When we have a 60+% increase in your values over the last couple of years, to think that we're going to have another 60%, if we do, that's dangerous.
Yes.
And so from that standpoint, to think that prices will not flatten or even pull back at some point would be naive. So from a seller's perspective, if you're considering that, I think time right now is really to look at this. And if you're watching this right now, we're going into the spring season. As far as the type of premiums that are paid, and typically what people are willing to pay as far as a premium, the timing of the year going into the season where they're going to use it, it's a pretty good time.
Yes.
So, all right. So we've talked about buyers. We've talked about sellers. What is it exactly? You've mentioned a little bit about what you're watching. What are some things that are on the horizon, maybe, that we can get excited about in this market that you're seeing?
Well, I just think, some of the things that you talked about earlier, looking at, the landscape here, all the land that we have that's going to not be developed, the beaches, this little, it's one of the only undeveloped areas in all of Florida. And when you go out and you look at the landscape of Florida and you look for an area that has new infrastructure coming and continuing to be in place, coupled with all these super high-end communities that maybe you buy in or maybe you don't, but you have those that are amenities at large, to come in and out of at your leisure as you want. There's nowhere like this in Florida, and we're still just in our infancy. Really, we're just now starting to really have a lot of services, and we've had such an influx of great people, dynamic people that have moved here in the last 2 years. So it's a great place to be right now. I think the short term, everything looks super strong. The medium term, there may be a little bit of question mark, but that's where opportunities are going to be there. And long term, I couldn't be more bullish on an area in the country, and because we get out, we travel, we see, and I'm happy every time I come home, and I think you all will be too. Speaking to people that haven't been here, that are curious about here, I would encourage you to come here, see our little piece of paradise, and see what's going on. It's quite amazing. I
talked to somebody the other day that was here this past summer, was planning their trip for this next summer. They were just talking about things, and I said, listen, it's changing every day. Literally within half a mile of my house on 30A, we've had 2 new restaurants open in the last month. So we're continuing to see those amenities go up. The value of living here is just continuing to go up. So exciting times to be in real estate in Northwest Florida. Listen, if you have any questions, reach out to your Berkshire Hathaway Home Services Beach Properties of Florida agent. They are the best in the business, and I know they'll take care of you and treat you like family. Take care, and we'll talk to you guys soon.